Welcome to Newslaundry Chhota Hafta. For the full episode, subscribe because it is behind the paywall and only subscribers get access to uncut, complete content. Newslaundry Hafta is our weekly wrap of all that made the news, all that didn't, and all that should have and all that shouldn't have. We agree, we disagree, we critique, and occasionally we beat each other up. But it's all good fun. Subscribe.
This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज़ लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. Welcome to another episode of Hafta in a week that promised rain, but we haven't had any so far. And every day,
yeah,
the Met
apparently
Department
Saturday
says,
is the day.
well, that's what they said last week, that Monday was the day, but it clearly wasn't. We're recording Hafta on Thursday, the 7th of July at 4 in the late afternoon. So some fast developments will not be updated by the time you listen to this, but we shall mention them. Before we get into the headlines, let me introduce the panel. We're all in the studio after a long time.
Yes.
Everybody in the panel. So there's 6 people, all of us. There is Manisha Pande. Hi, Manisha.
Hi.
Our very own Mehraj Lone.
Hello.
Raman Kirpal.
Hi.
Anand Vardhan.
Hello.
And joining us, our guest today is Hilal Ahmed. Hi, Hilal.
Hi.
So Hilal is an associate professor at the Center for Study of Developing Societies, which is in Delhi. He writes regularly on the nature of Muslim political discourse. He is the Associate Editor for South Asian Studies, Journal of the British Association of South Asian Studies. He has also written a few books. One is called Siyasi Muslims, a story of political Islams in India. That's a plural, I see. Muslim political discourse in post-colonial India, monuments, memory, contestations, and then democratic accommodations, minorities in contemporary India. So, which was your last one out of the 3?
No, I think you missed one.
Okay, I've just been listed 3. So which is the 4th?
The 4th, it's Contemporary Movement of Indian Democracy. It's an edited volume.
I see. Interesting. And what's that about?
It's basically different case studies looking at the ways in which democracy is understood at the grassroots level. And we have tried to analyze these different case studies to produce a narrative or explanatory narrative of Indian politics at the moment.
You know, I was listening to, I think this was the BBC podcast or the NPR politics podcast. A report has emerged, this is just yesterday, which has demonstrated that Arab nations, I mean, I just heard the headline and hear the rest of it. A survey indicates that, and it's a pretty large and vast survey, that citizens of Arab nations are disillusioned with democracy as a form of government to provide whatever, good governance to them. I was like, really? Like the people don't believe in democracy? That was kind of strange. I should actually Google it and check it out. Have you heard of this one? Just yesterday I heard this.
No, but I think democracy is something which needs to be understood in its own context, because people would have different meanings. And in fact, in our studies, we have tried to look at the ways in which the term democracy is understood. And in one of the surveys that came out in 2017, we asked this question with the sample size was around more than 20,000 in India. And we asked this question, what is your meaning of democracy? And the most important meaning of democracy that came up in the survey was freedom to speak whatever I want, I feel I can actually. So democracy is understood in relation to freedom of expression. So that's the dominant meaning in India.
I'm very surprised that is the dominant. I wouldn't imagine that was a big concern for Indians, like the freedom to speak, because I thought that we kind of internalized.
There are different statements made, and on the basis of this statement, we club them together to find out what is the most relevant explanation of these different statements. And the most relevant, it doesn't mean that people would say vote dalna, etc. So associating democracy with institution is obviously one of the key explanation people would make. But the substantive meaning of democracy in India, according to our surveys and research, is that I have a right to assert myself in various ways. And because freedom of speech and expression is something which has to be understood in its own context. It was because basically what we do, we take it rather uncritically and we assume that we understand this. But if you go to people, if you go to voters, they have their own meaning of what do we mean, of their meaning of expression.
So I guess the contexts vary depending on where you ask the question, which cultural milieu.
Yeah.
But I would think that a country where you can really pee wherever you want, I mean, freedoms is hardly a problem. Like, I was in GK yesterday, I got to the car, I was with my niece, and I put on the headlights. Then you park against the wall, the guy right in front there, peeing. I was like, dude, like, at least fine, go behind the tree. And ये ठीक है, सबका अपना अपना अंदाज है. So I have just seen the color drain from Hilal's face. Hilal thought there'd be some sort of intellectual discussion here, but as soon as I have taken the discussion a little towards the urinal department, he seems a little disillusioned. पता नहीं मैं यहाँ क्यों आया. But anyway, I promise you when Anand, Mehraj, Raman and Manisha speak, it'll get better. But before we get into the headlines,
Maybe not.
A few announcements, 3 important announcements. We have, you may have seen the promos, a new show coming up. It is called Ye Bhi Theek Hai. It's a podcast with Kunal Kamra and Sanjay Rajoura, 2 of the finest stand-up comics in my view in India. It promises to be a really fun, interesting and insightful, because both those are really smart and well-read guys, about various shows from stand-up comedy to religion to freedom of speech to monogamy. Different episodes take different things. The first 2 episodes are free. All subsequent episodes are going to be behind the paywall. So you can share the free ones far and wide. Mufat khors enjoy it. But after that, all other episodes are going to be behind the paywall. It's called Ye Bhi Theek Hai. It's a podcast. It's a video podcast, but of course, I prefer listening to it only in audio format. But you can also see it in video, which is also behind the paywall. The second thing is we've just released our Let's Talk About after, I think, almost a year and a half.
Woohoo!
RSS. It is 3 episodes. Aditya and Shardul and Lippy and Anil have worked very hard on it. So do check that out. That is also behind the paywall.
Let's talk about RSS.
Yeah, it's Let's Talk About RSS. Here's a little clip from that. Dr. Keshav Baliram Hedgewar. Now, who was he and how much do we really know about him? What we do know is he was born on April the 1st, 1889 in Nagpur to a Telugu Brahmin family with modest means. Young Keshav grows up near the erstwhile Bhosle ruling family's palace with heroic tales about Shivaji and the Peshwas. Religious teachings are a tradition in his family, but they never appeal to his true nature. All accounts from his biographies and testimonials from others show a heavy influence of Lokmanya Tilak and the poet Ramdas on a very young Keshav, which instilled a deep sense of patriotism in him. There are many accounts of his childhood where he shows his ability to organize and his fierce disdain for foreign rule. According to one popular story, when he was young, he planned to dig a tunnel from his teacher's house to Sita Buldi Fort in Nagpur, a British garrison at the time, to remove the Union Jack atop the fort. Now here I speak with Hitesh Shankar, editor of RSS's weekly magazine Panchjanya, talking about some childhood incidents from the life of Hedgewar, which portray his early inclination towards fighting the British monarchy. This too is behind the paywall, so check it out and do subscribe and pay to keep news free. And finally, if you're listening to this on Saturday, tomorrow on Sunday, we have a live recording of Awful and Awesome. It is only for subscribers, so do come. It is at 6 p.m. We will be serving you tea, coffee and some snacks. We may even throw in some nimbu pani, budgets allow. It is at Seminar Hall, Kamala Devi Complex. It's on the first floor, IIC, near Khan Market, the heart of Lutyens. It is going to be a live Awful and Awesome recording where there will be Nenika, Rajshri and myself. We will also include you, a wonderful audience and subscribers. Limited seats to attend, write to subscription at newslaundry.com if you haven't already. And if you're bringing a +1 who's not a subscriber, we will not let that person leave unless that person subscribes, and we can use some pretty horrible means. I have been trained by you people personally. So we don't take any ads. So do come, bring a +1 who you think would subscribe before they leave. On that note, Mehraj or Manisha, can you please get the headlines and we shall carry on.
The top headlines, starting with the media. Alt News co-founder Mohammad Zubair on Thursday moved the Supreme Court for bail and the quashing of a hate speech FIR filed against him in Sitapur, Uttar Pradesh. The website on Monday rejected the allegations made by the Delhi police that it had received funds from foreign sources in violation of the law. The police in Delhi as well as in UP have filed FIRs against filmmaker Leena Manimekalai for sharing a poster of her documentary Kali, which depicts the Hindu goddess smoking. And in Madhya Pradesh, the police have booked Trinamool Congress MP Mahua Moitra for describing Kali as a meat-eating and alcohol-accepting goddess, quote-unquote.
And the Aaj Tak is going rah-rah about it, although this statement was made on their event. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
India Today nicely milked this opportunity.
Muhammad Talib, a Muslim man who runs a small restaurant in UP, has been arrested for packing meat dishes in a newspaper with images of Hindu gods.
The restaurant owners though said that this was rotis, not chicken.
As if that makes a difference.
But what were the rotis being eaten with?
Chicken.
Then
A panchayat in Haryana's Manisha has called for an economic boycott of Muslim shopkeepers and vendors in their area, describing them as illegal immigrants. Members of Bajrang Dal this week stopped a play being staged in Karnataka's Shiva Moga, alleging that it had a love jihad angle. Apparently, it showed a interfaith marriage.
Or a relationship, I'm not sure.
Yeah. The Uttar Pradesh police on Tuesday detained Zee Hindustan anchor Rohit Ranjan from his home in Ghaziabad for airing a misleading video of Congress leader Rahul Gandhi on July the 1st.
we'll
Uttar
discuss
Pradesh
this.
police actually was kind of the savior here. It was Chhattisgarh police that came to arrest him, and then Noida
And
police kind of.
As today's paper says, the FIR was filed 10 minutes before they went to pick him up. So
Only after he tweeted and he tagged Chief Minister.
So
and then
just saying that
within 10 minutes.
someone had predicted that all this is going to happen about a year ago. Just saying someone here around this table had predicted this.
Yes, please gloat.
That's
Yeah,
what I
you
was
did.
doing.
You did, yes.
British Pakistani businessman Anil Musarrat has won a defamation case against Republic Bharat at the London High Court over allegations made by the channel's lead anchor and editor Arnab Goswami. Activist Sharjeel Imam has claimed that a police official entered his Tihar jail cell with 8 to 10 people, assaulted him and called him a terrorist. Late last week, Justice Surya Kant of the Supreme Court made some rather controversial oral observations while hearing a petition by Nupur Sharma, the suspended BJP spokesperson. The judge said that she should have apologized to the entire country for making derogatory remarks against the Prophet on a Times Now show and
Kind of
for
blamed her
putting
for
the-
everything that ensued later and refused to club her FIRs, basically.
Yes, and since then an open letter has been sent to the CJI, signed by 15 retired judges, 77 retired bureaucrats and 25 retired armed forces officers against the observations made by the judge. A cleric at the Ajmer Dargah has been arrested by the Rajasthan police after he allegedly offered to give his home to anyone who beheads Nupur Sharma. The Maharashtra police arrested the main accused in the murder of a chemist in Amravati. That happened on Saturday, last
Happened
Saturday.
a while ago and it emerged now, and he had shared a poster on WhatsApp in support of Nupur.
Also in Maharashtra, new Chief Minister Eknath Shinde has won the floor test in the state assembly, so he's staying at
And
least
there
for
is
now.
a case pending in the Supreme Court that challenges 16 of those MLAs. They want disqualification, the Uddhav Sena. And of course, there's a fight on for the party symbol.
And there's a discussion about who's the actual Chief Minister.
Yeah. If we can actually discuss that in a little bit.
Smriti Irani is India's new Minority Affairs Minister after Mukhtar Abbas Naqvi resigned on Wednesday. His exit has left the BJP with no Muslim MP for the first time in its history.
Just MP or any representative?
Cabinet. I think in the cabinet.
I think they have one MLA somewhere.
Oh, they do.
Maybe in Assam. Janata Dal United leaders RCP Singh also resigned on Wednesday from the cabinet. He was Minister for Steel. Now Jyotiraditya Scindia will take over that ministry.
Basically, both these guys, their Rajya Sabha terms just got over.
Yes. Music composer Ilya Raja. Well, music composer is, I think we should say legend or something. Athlete PT Osha, screenwriter V. Vijendra Prasad and philanthropist Virendra Hegde are nominated for Rajya Sabha. All 4 nominees are from the southern states of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka.
How old must Raja be? He's been around for a long time, man. I'll just check. Anyway.
In June, India saw the biggest decline in jobs in a non-lockdown month, according to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. The unemployment rate in the country increased to 7.8% of the total workforce in June from about 7.12% in May.
Ilya Raja is 79. That's not very old.
He's going to,
It's fine.
It's not very old. You're one step away from 80.
Not for a politician. Not for a life in politics.
Clearly.
He's not a politician really, but
Okay.
as a public representative. No?
I mean, due respect to Raja, who is a legend, like you said, I mean, what value is he going to provide to the... I'm curious to see. Anyway.
In Rajya Sabha.
The Assam cabinet on Tuesday granted indigenous status to 40 lakh Assamese-speaking Muslims in the state who do not have a migration history from East Pakistan, what's now Bangladesh. An unusually high number of incidents involving SpiceJet aircraft have prompted the aviation regulator to seek an explanation from the airline. More on this from our very own Raman sir.
Yes. And I have a few theories. I have a few theories around this, taking off from the Maharashtra theories that we floated on this podcast.
So we'll finish the headlines and then you can comment.
It was really
when we come to that.
Yeah. Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwat Mann tied the knot with Gurpreet.
Bhagwat. You are missing.
Mohan Bhagwat.
This is like the RSS line, all Sikhs and Hindus.
Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwat Mann tied the knot with Gurpreet Kaur, a doctor, at his residence in Chandigarh on Thursday.
Mehraj is really
you must be editing someday.
Boris Johnson on Thursday agreed to resign as the leader of the Conservative Party, but said he'll continue to be the Prime Minister until a new person is elected.
Thanks to Indians and Pakistanis.
Yes, most likely until the autumn, but he is still under pressure to go immediately.
But why?
Because two of them, the representatives, decided to take off support, no? I forget their names.
Like
one is an Indian origin and one is Pakistan
Rishi
origin.
Sunak is the first one to resign.
Or Rishi Sunak and Sajid. But there are like 50 others also.
But they were the ones. They were the first two dominoes. Right. In fact, this is playing out even as we are recording. So going by Boris Johnson's history, you never know. By the time we finish recording this, he may have changed his mind and said, actually, I'll stay. Because there's some like really funny memes have come up around this.
One kind of hurt sentiments can be called artistic hurt sentiments. A film is made, a painting is made, and people would say,
or rather hurt sentiments due to art.
Due to art, but I would call them, I would say artistic. Because the manner in which they play out their politics is artistic.
Okay.
Because they would say that this is an art too. Obviously, it's an art.
Fair enough.
To look at Padmavat controversy, it's actually an art. So I would say artistic controversy.
Okay.
Or artistic hurt sentiment. The second kind of hurt sentiments are the Rotiwala incident. It is everyday hurt sentiment. There are certain everyday things which we see, and you have to just identify something and transform it into a civilization conflict.
Okay.
That's the second kind of hurt sentiment. And the third kind of hurt sentiment are violent one, Udaipur event or lynching. So therefore, we should not club everything in one box. We have to just, take them out, think closely, and only then we would be able to respond them with informed argument. So therefore, who these people are? These are actually very much rooted in the political culture that has evolved over the years. And do not reduce everything to BJP and Narendra Modi. Because this political culture, every political party shared this culture, by the way. Look at Salman Rushdie controversy in 1989. No one knew who Salman Rushdie was. No one knew what kind of book he had written at that point of time. Rajiv Gandhi government was the first government in the world who banned the book. So obviously you are creating, or Ayatollah Khomeini, I don't think that Ayatollah Khomeini had read the book. So you create some kind of a controversy, and this is artistic because, that was actually a book-related thing.
It is about Modi and BJP. Like a film like Jaane Bhi Do Yaro's climax scene could not have been shown today. A song in Bobby like Beshak Mandir Masjid Todo, Ye Kenda Bullesha, Bobby's posters would have been burnt and the filmmaker would have withdrawn it. It's not like the people have changed. It is just the person, a film like Amar Akbar Anthony would not be made today. So the assumption that because people are one way, India will be one way, Indian people have historically demonstrated that we can often behave like cattle, and one really strong leader can change how we live. So I really don't think it matters how people think. It's just how the person in the center interprets their power, and they can make everybody fall in line, as we are seeing right now.
India sustained as a kind of, say, pluralist society or polity, because a large chunk of the population is indifferent to a lot of things. It's indifferent to religious mobilization. It's that indifference has, perhaps because of a lot of social media interference and the mega emergence of not supposedly, it's a Hindu interest party. So Hindu interest parties and new kind of media emerging, that indifference has receded a bit because of social media interface and the kind of social conversations and a lot of other inputs. That indifference has receded. Hate and love, I don't agree with that, because it assumes moral superiority before arguing something. So to assume moral superiority before you are presenting a specific case dilutes a lot of things and specifics.
The question whether we are going to see India as a theocratic, I personally believe, we may not see that simply because of the fact that we are very diverse. But yes, definitely an attempt is being made. When we talk of our country, we talk in terms of regions. When we talk of our country in terms of religion, then we say that we are 70% or 80% of Hindus, where all diversity gets merged into one
right.
Hindu. You have 13% of Muslims. You have 6% of Christians or Jains or whatever, right? So now the definite attempt into that direction, that 80% of Hindus, despite their diversity, if they can first feel that we are Hindu and then we are somebody else. So that attempt has been made. So that is why the people with upward mobility are doing these kind of things, in all categories, whether it is artistic hurt or whether it is,
the
everyday
elite.
hurt. So they all have got a direction. Okay. So if I'm a Muslim and I'm carrying a cow, then I have to be beaten up. Okay.
Muslims were evicted from land and the chief minister publicly said, I'll give this off to Hindu youth. There are economic boycotts happening everywhere. Every single day there's news of a Muslim being killed in custody or on the road by whoever feels like it. It's come to the point where a Muslim feels, if you're not like part of the elite who moves in elite and secure circles, you dread going out on a train, on a bus, just walking down the road.
Or even exerting your right
or just wearing any markers. The great new hope of secularism, the last thing he did before leaving as chief minister was rename two so-called Muslim named cities.
Aurangabad.
So you add all this up. So what is happening? Is it only when people start being butchered in numbers on the streets that's genocide? Or is this something also part of it?
I personally find it quite lazy to just simply, bring that Germany comparison or Rwanda comparison or Pakistan comparison, even though there's much to learn from the world. But 2 or 3 things we can observe around us, and specifically in the North Indian Hindi heartland, is the idea of secularism. I think increasingly a lot of Hindu majority of Hindus don't really get it. I do think there's a debate around it that did we even need to be secular? If Muslims could have their very simplistic things, these are, and I guess much of it had to do with the fact that our post-independence leadership were really dreamers, they were really idealists, they were really looking at shaping a country in a certain way. And it was pretty top-down, that they decided that they were looking at the West, they were looking at democratic liberal ideals and, had a certain vision for India. But those visions are now definitely being debated. Some of it because the BJP is strong and, it's been a long project for them to start these debates. But also I think there's a lot of conversation around secularism, which probably answers where we'll go. That people don't really get why we need to be secular. They don't understand why. As a desirable virtue or value. Yeah, if Muslims can have their Pakistan, if they manage to get a Bangladesh for themselves, why can't India belong to Hindus? Sometimes it's very hard to argue with that also. And so I think that is definitely happening.
So suppose if a lynching has happened, the minister would go and garland the person who have done that in I think Jayan Sena. Yeah. So that's
I think that was in Jharkhand.
Yes, was in Jharkhand. And finally, there is a complete silence at the top.
Right.
So this silence is providing some kind of legitimacy to the person who has decided to actually perform that very act of lynching. So this 4 stages thing actually continued to survive in India for over 7 or 6 years at least after first lynching. So event happens, discourse created, second level leadership would come, and then there is silence. So the message is clear. So it is actually the functioning of the 3 type of people. So the message is obviously, I completely agree with you.
No, you are single-handedly responsible for everything that is happening in the country.
Right. Okay.
Now, that cause and effect relationship coming from a Supreme Court judge is problematic, because causality in jurisprudence could mean that establishing cause and effect relationship. I think that's a very important part of human reasoning also, for physical sciences also, and in human affairs, in social sciences, in jurisprudence, everything, the cause and effect relationship. And that was a very disproportionate way of putting things. And that is also, that can also give a message that verbal excess can be a ground for physical violence. So I think for a layman like me to say this in casual conversations is okay, but to come from the highest court of justice in India I think that was problematic.
The big problem with the statements, I think, was because it was coming on the back of a killing. So when an Udaipur has happened and you know that somebody is murdered for supporting Nupur, you have to be a bit careful. Even if I agree that Nupur's statements were irresponsible, she had to be suspended. Times now has to be called out for the kind of debates they do, for the kind of passions they ignite, and for this general television news format that they've created, where you have to say vile things to each other. That's the thing that you have to do every night on prime time. Yeah. And Nupur is just one cog in that wheel, basically. So I'm happy to have the courts call that out. But then if it's coming on the back of a murder and a very real threat to her life, I would not take it lightly that Nupur probably has, she said, I've got that
cause
threat.
for concern.
So that's a cause for concern. So I think they should have been careful. And I think as journalists, if we start celebrating this, and I think there was a lot of glee about it, ki chalo Nupur is, she's gotten bashed from the court on this, but it makes it then difficult to support a journalist who's actually doing journalism.
And in case of the court, I think it was just the oral observations, and there was for oral observation, there was a prima facie causal relationship. You had a case in Rajasthan, you have a case in Amravati, you had 2 persons arrested in Bihar, all because of Nupur. So the country is going topsy-turvy on just one statement. So there is a prima facie causal relationship for a judge to make an observation, an oral observation. If it is judgment, yes, you need to go further deeper into it, and there the judge is not the one who has to judge. From the
jurisprudence point of view,
from the evidences being given to him. But in this particular case, I think oral observation rightly made.
This is also illustrative of how elite public discourse comes about, right? Just a couple of days before this happened, the court had said something even more insidious in the case of Tista Saddleword. That just died down.
Formed the basis of
which
an
is
arrest.
even much, much worse. This was just, but because discourse is created through the media and this and that, and this becomes the big thing. And what it does is it creates a distorted image. In the sense Manisha was talking about earlier about Nupur Sharma said this, so now there's a reaction to it. This is it didn't start here. The whole idea of blasphemy against Hindu deities, you can trace it back to the whole idea of cow protection in the constitution if you were to go that deep far. So it's not like it started here and now there's going to be a reaction. The lynchings for killing cows goes back so many years. That's another thing, the way it creates elite discourse. And the third is, most important, I think, is the idea of free speech. Every society has to make rules because obviously if you have to live in a society, you can't have absolute free speech, even though that might be the most desirable. You have to create a line somewhere. Why you create that line is very important, and that will depend from society to society.
I think it would be great if we pay attention to the Joint Parliamentary Committee report. Remember, it was introduced in 2016, Joint Parliamentary Committee constituted. And what is interesting is that all the questions that are asked in Shaheen Bagh were asked by the BJP members of that committee, and the government answered them in the Joint Parliamentary Committee. Time and again, the report says that the idea of minority is central in that. So if we look at the structure of CEA 2019, we find that, Hindus and other minorities that are coming from 3 Muslim majority state. The larger imaginary construction in this case is that Hindus, the India that is Hindu, the majority is surrounded by a different kind of majorities. So therefore the point is that we should not look at powerlessness of Hindus with regard to Indian population, their presence in India. Rather, we have to take a global look, or at least the South Asia look. So I think that's the reason why the reception of Nupur Sharma would contribute to the minority-centric politics of BJP.
All of you listening in, the Chhota Hafta, do subscribe so you can listen to the entire Hafta. We will see you again next week with the Hafta. Till then, subscribe, pay to keep news free, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Thank you. Goodbye.
All the News Laundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to News Laundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Sun liya Afrika, mufat khoron. Not to brag or anything, but News Laundry Hafta features in the top 50 in the world on SoundCloud in the news and politics category for podcasts. So do subscribe and see what you're missing, because when the public pays, the public is served. When advertisers pay, advertisers are served. Subscribe, help keep news independent and free. All News Laundry podcasts are available on iTunes and Stitcher and any other podcast platform.